Man, Earthrise is coming out slow, right? And what's funny about that is there were people who told me I was stupid for saying that the Earthrise show was on track to miss the Earthrise toy line, like the Siege show missed its toy line. Well, here we are with a massively delayed toy line, and the show is still basically nowhere in sight.
Objection!
Okay, so between when I started this video and the time it took to actually get it out, they did actually announce the release date for Earthrise, December 30th, 2020. So ultimately, yes, it does look like this season is going to be out slightly more on time than Siege was, catching the tail end of Earthrise, but also catching the beginning of Kingdom. I would like to point out, though, it is still only on time at all because the Earthrise toy line is coming out so slowly. Insert over, back to the video as it was originally completed. I swear, it's like they are trying to drag it out so the show can release on time, but that looks like it's not happening. Basically, no one has seen Wave 2, and Wave 3 is just kind of randomly out places. I saw Fast Track at my nearest Target a few weeks back, and different online retailers have different figures from Wave 3 in stock. Case in point, I picked up Trailbreaker on the Big Bad Toy Store, having just given up on the hunt, because quite frankly, I was sick of not finding anything after traveling to like 5 different stores every week. Like, is distribution just fucked? I was on the lookout for a Slitherfang for months, and I didn't find a one at any of the stores in my area. Then randomly, I went to a Super Target 40 miles from my house, and they had basically nothing but Slitherfangs. And don't even get me started on how hard it was to get a Skylynx. Anyways, I'm actually supposed to be talking about Trailbreaker. I don't know why I got off track there for a minute. Trailbreaker is a retool of the Grapple figure from Wave 1 of Earthrise. If you all remember my initial Earthrise video, you might recall that I actually had a tiny amount of praise for that figure in all 3 seconds I talked about it. It's actually one of my favorite figures from the entire line. I didn't spend a lot of time on a bunch of the decent figures from Earthrise because I was rushing to get to the figures I really hated. Fun fact, that video was as much about my irritation at only hearing praise for the line as it was an excuse for me to include my very real reaction from figuring out that Cliffjumper's backpack plugs into the rear of his gun. Anyways, I just kind of breezed over all the figures I had any positivity towards to get to the ones that I really didn't like because I needed to vent off my excess steam before I went insane. Anyways, yeah, I actually like the Grapple a good bit. He's the spitting image of the show, he's got a good transformation that reminds me of figures from my childhood, and I love the head sculpt and its crisp and clean paint. This is exactly the dumpy nerdbot he needs to be. I'm a sucker for a character who's not a warrior. When everyone's an ass kicker, no one is cool. When there are ass kickers and regular dudes just trying their best, everyone is cool. Anyways, once again, Trailbreaker is a retool of Grapple. This stems basically entirely from the fact that back in G1, the two were the same figure. So you might think that this would be a perfect update, but you'd be wrong. You see, Grapple came out in the second season, after the show started trying to more stringently mimic the toys in terms of appearance, whereas Trailbreaker is from season 1. In that season, they took a much heavier liberty with the designs of the toys when they drew them for the show. Largely because the showmakers never saw the toys, as those were all still in Japan, and they only had blurry pictures to base the animation models on. The ultimate result was that if you weren't told that they were based on the same toy, you would never know that that was the case. Trailbreaker was a massively sleeker bot than Grapple, with a narrower waist, a broader physique, and a complete lack of shoulder wings. He looked something like a football player. So this is a heavy departure from his design. The shoulder wings were one of my biggest problems with the Grapple, and they are worse here by virtue of existing at all. On both, these arms should have been on ball joints, not pinned like they are. If you want to move the arm forward, the wings have to come too, which looks terrible, is not the way it worked in the show, and is dumb because the solution to the problem is a type of joint that's been in use since the 90s. Trailbreaker has his trusty punch dildo, just like his mold brother, and I'm sorry for what I must do now. If you know what's happening, then you know. Anyways, the annoying part about this accessory is that it's slightly misshapen. No matter which fist it's on, it angles inwards, which always looks bad. Plastic on this figure is as thin as it ever was on the Grapple, but an interesting thing I noticed is that the Siege grime is not present. I know I'm in the minority on this, but I actually liked the Siege grime most of the time, and I know kids' imagination would take off with that kind of detail. So yeah, we got none here. But interestingly enough, I feel like even the people who hated it might agree that it feels like we got screwed on paint with this figure. Like, there is just a massive paint reduction on this guy. I feel like maybe the Autobot symbol was made just a bit bigger to offset that. It has less than half the paint on the face, no wearing on the bumper, massively reduced paint along the sides, his gun is painted, and the tops of his knees are too, but they didn't paint the lower shins, so I feel like we actually lost more paint than we gained. Someone's probably going to argue that we lost paint to gain the camper shell, but is that really worth more than Grapple's wings and winch? Let's get off the complaint train for a while though and talk about the head sculpt. That's a damn fine head sculpt. I don't know that it's exactly the show's face, but it's miles more than close enough for me. And I know that I just complained that there wasn't any paint on it, but that was more me complaining that the paint didn't go anywhere else because this face really shouldn't have paint. His head is supposed to be the same color as the rest of him. He's got his doodads behind his head, and while I think maybe they misinterpreted where they're supposed to go, and that's definitely not how they were supposed to mount, but I am glad that they're here and I am fine with how they're placed. It does give him a unique identity compared to Grapple. This is a very tasty color scheme. Red, black, and silver are pure class. Something I like about this figure is that there's optional parts forming to make a shield. I got no issue with parts forming when it's optional, though I do find the idea of using part of yourself as a shield against weapons made to punch through you rather stupid. This is like trying to use a severed human torso as a shield against an assault rifle. Like, I don't think all 1 extra inches of camper shell is going to stop a super laser that will readily punch through all your 10 feet of condensed robot torso. But hey, this is at worst a neutral feature for the people not into it. For everyone else, it's a positive, so it's an objectively good one. One last gripe before we get to the transformation, and that's that for some reason mine doesn't hold together as well in the torso as the Grapple does. He keeps wanting to separate at the back and flop down. As for the transformation, nothing awe-inspiring or new here. It's just a fun classic conversion. I swear I've seen this on 100 figures that transformed something like this back in the 90s. This seriously reminds me of the toys I used to beg my mom to buy for me when we went to Rite Aid back when I was like 8 or 9. That's a good thing, at least in my book. It's a pretty cohesive truck mode, but there's a ton of him hanging below the floor of the vehicle. It should look like this. The back is not as cohesive as the rest of the truck. Even the doors with their huge panel lines and shifting colors looks a bit better than that. That's something I think the camera might be making more apparent. This thing is not a unified black color. For some reason, they've used 2 different plastics to make this thing. So some of it is a nice pitch black, whereas some of it has a more golden hue to it. It's much less obvious in person, at least under my lights. This is a fun mode, and it rolls good. This is not a perfect figure, but it's absolutely worth the price they are charging for it, which is a nice thing to be able to say about Earthrise. They're not overcharging us for once. Oh, to be damned with faint praise. And that's not half of what I have to say, but it's enough of what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you like what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.